Good evening, dear TV viewers. During last 2 days, Ukraine is in a difficult position. Close to our borders, we have an aggressive enemy. What should we do in such a situation? What is the purpose of introducing martial law in some areas? We will talk about it all now with the President of Ukraine. He agreed to answer our questions. Good evening, Mr. President.
Thank you for this opportunity. In fact, people require explanation, especially when they watch news, including those from the Verkhovna Rada. Sometimes they are somewhat confused, so this conversation is needed to explain to people what is happening.
Mr. President, well, just about the fact that people are most worried of. People ask, why is martial law introduced just in the 5th year of the war? Why was this not done during Ilovaisk? Why was this not done during Debaltseve? What exactly has changed? And what exactly are the results of the martial state you are expecting first and foremost?
In fact, what happened on November the 25th is an extraordinary event. For the first time in 4.5 years of the Russian aggression, officially, without tearing chevrons off, without green men, many Russian warships attacked Ukrainian ships, which are in strict compliance with international law. In strict compliance with our agreement on the use of the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. With sending a message in advance and clearly following the Kerch traffic control pointers that told them to stay in a given water area, and wait for further guidance on their turn to pass the Kerch-Yanikali Canal of the Kerch Strait. You have all seen on the video the attack of the warships. In the first stage, without the use of weapons, but ramming attempts to sink Ukrainian ships. And when the Naval Force Commander saw these then provocative actions of the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation and the FSB Border Service of Russia, he gave orders to our ships to return back to Odessa. After leaving a 12-mile zone of Crimea, recognized by us as Ukrainian territorial waters, the incident itself took place in neutral waters. Our ships were fired upon, our ships were damaged, our sailors were wounded, the assault was carried out, our military defended, and only defended, because there was a provocation to make us open fire. It would be desirable to kill someone. And I do not exclude that after this, a scenario would be a repetition of what took place in Georgia in 2008. Yesterday, Chief of the General Staff and the Commanding Officer of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Viktor Muzhenko, provided clear evidence that Russian aircraft opened fire at our ships. And it was a full-fledged military action that clearly falls within the international definition of aggression, which was defined by the United Nations conventions. In addition, the Convention on the Freedom of Navigation and many other documents of international law were violated. And most importantly, I would like to say that we have clear information that this is just the beginning. Yesterday, we tried to demonstrate those data that are not mysterious. In the intercepted negotiations of Russian sailors, it was clearly defined that the order to open fire was received from their command. That is, it was a license to kill. Of course, Ukraine must react. It all happened under the rigid blockade of electronic warfare, because not only ours, but also Russian ships were not able to communicate. Even the satellite was blocked. And the information we received about the shelling of our ships was not provocation. We got it from other sources, from sources of intelligence. It was then that I immediately convened the War Cabinet and provided the military an opportunity to make urgent proposals needed for legislative equipping of the army, protecting soldiers who should counter a possible widespread ground aggression from the Russian Federation. The intelligence provided several proofs, and I'd like to show them to you for the first time. This is a Russian military base, which is located 18 kilometers away from our border. This is September the 17th. It's September the 24th. And all these are tanks. This is October. As you can see, the number of tanks in the bases, which are located along our border, has tripled. Why were they relocated there? The number of units relocated there has increased dramatically, covering the entire length of our border. Positions on possible exercises do not justify this rise. And after the incident in the Sea of Azov, we had to equip the Ukrainian army in the event of widespread military invasion. These tanks are not yet visible, but they are still there, and I want no one to think that it's a trifle. Ukraine faces the threat of widespread war with the Russian Federation. That is why the defense emergency was initially proposed by the War Cabinet, then by the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, and it was voted unanimously. The draft proposal by the military. Of course, I could not wait even for a minute. I appealed to the Verkhovna Rada with the requirement to convene an extraordinary parliamentary session, and I introduced the draft decree, which was prepared by the military cabinet and unanimously adopted at the meeting of the National Security and Defense Council. And the Verkhovna Rada, despite everything we saw there, quickly responded, and MPs gathered quickly enough. This is the number of ships and their sharp rise in the Sea of Azov. There were names, types of the military equipment concentrated in the Black and Azov Sea basin. And we see that in the waters of the Sea of Azov, they are all concentrated in a special way in the Kerch Yenikali Canal. They had been preparing. They had known. These were targeted actions with the supply of the electronic warfare, Marines, and other things.
Mr. President,
please, the last sentence. Here we have a number of ships, the number of troops which were, for example, in Crimea. Here's the number of soldiers and tanks that were there. Here is the number of armoured personnel carriers that was in 2014. Here are the numbers in October 2018. Whatever position you take, the number of soldiers has increased threefold. The number of armoured personnel carriers has increased by 5 times. Artillery by almost 10 times. Airplanes, salvo fire systems, ships, that's by at least 5 to 10 times. The number is increasing now. Why is this being done? And do we have the right not to respond to this? Do we have the moral right not to support it in the legislative dimension and not to support our soldiers? Do we have the right to turn it into some cheap PR or pre-election rhetoric? And precisely because of this, I, as president, had to use my constitutional powers and ensure adequate provision of legislative support to the armed forces of Ukraine in order to protect every Ukrainian, to protect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence of our state, protect our land.
Mr. President, please tell us what Ukraine receives as a result of the introduction of the martial law in certain territories. After all, the President personally receives extraordinary powers by this decree, but the military authorities receive no less powers at the local level. And how to protect people from arbitrariness, from the temptation to do someone's little things on the ground, because then you will have nobody to appeal to.
Well, this is a top-secret document. I just can tell you that along the border, with a clear positioning, who arranges sabotage, who organizes cyber attacks, which will be the means to block the armed forces of Ukraine, which have been thrown over, including air reconnaissance aircraft, for providing all types of intelligence. It's happening right now. And of course, a briefing has been made, including for representatives of NATO, representatives of our North Atlantic Alliance partners, representatives of the United States of America. And after seeing these documents, you saw yesterday's international reaction. I think we'll talk more about it. Concerning the restriction of constitutional rights and freedoms, extending the powers of the President and what is waiting for people. Position 1. The powers of the President are not expanded. The President has exclusive constitutional powers, including the defense of the country, in the framework of Article 106 of the Constitution. This is a direct constitutional responsibility of the President, who must protect the country. The decision is exclusively preventive. What for? If aggression takes place, I will need minutes to organize effective defense for Ukraine. Already now, there are meetings in the Ministry of Defense and in the General Staff with the involvement of all representatives in the defense and security sector in order to build the country's defense in the framework of the decisions made, within the framework of the presidential decree. Third, and the most important thing, military administrations will not be created, and only the headquarters of defense will be created to organize the preparation of territorial defense, checking the reserve, checking the ability to mobilize, checking the technical condition. Parts of the troops will be redeployed. Combat coordination will be shortened. Stays at permanent deployment and deportation will be shortened in order to immediately arrange effective protection. And most importantly, the purpose of the martial law is to show that the enemy will pay a very high price if they decide to attack us, and that it will be like a cold shower that will stop the insane who have plans to attack Ukraine. And if there is no aggression, consider that the purpose of these actions has been achieved. Of course, we will continue our struggle to take Ukrainian seamen and officers out from Russian jails, because I am sure that the play of fake criminal responsibility for breaking the Ukrainian border will be played out. For the whole world recognizes Crimea is Ukraine, and territorial waters are Ukrainian. And in fact, all of this is a devastating farce, and orders are given to the relevant secret services and to Mrs. Denisova, the ombudswoman, and I gave the necessary instructions to my representatives, embassies, in order to take all the measures that we have at our disposal in order to bring our boys back home. And most importantly, if there is no open Russian invasion outside the operation of the United Forces in the east and in annexed Crimea, I emphasize that this is my principal position. No restrictions on constitutional rights and freedoms will occur. Visit concerts, go to banks, no need to run to the stores and buy matches and salt. The order was given to the head of the National Bank to carry out appropriate work with banks. No restrictions on withdrawal of deposits, on currency exchange operations, traveling abroad. No restrictions will be for Ukrainian citizens. As for Russian citizens, they will get these restrictions. And I think that's quite justified, because it is quite irresponsible to create, through the appropriate visa-free regime here, inside, the addition to the fifth column, which still works here. I say to everyone who tried to scare anyone, this is only a preventive opportunity, but there is aggression. There will be partial mobilization. In the first place, the reserve of the first turn will be mobilized. The guys are now packing things and writing to the army about their readiness to defend Ukraine. And this will be no longer drunkards and deserters, which we had very much in mobilization in 2014. And this is already prepared warriors with experience in the ATO, who know what units they will serve in, have professional training, and immediately, from the first minutes, we will substantially increase the number of our armed forces. We distribute financial resources, provide all the necessary increased number of our armed forces, and force the enemy to be responsible for violating the state border of Ukraine.
Well, I think we can hardly use the confrontation with the aggressor independently, alone.
How are our Western partners reacting to the introduction of martial law? Do they support such a mechanism?
First, we see absolute support and understanding of the decisions made by the military cabinet, the National Security and Defense Council, the President, and yesterday by the Verkhovna Rada. I emphasize separately that yesterday, when this decision was made, we firmly stood in the position to protect the constitutional rights and freedoms of citizens, including the right to vote. Yesterday, by the way, there was a very interesting incident. I want to just tell it to you. The military officers offered the military cabinet what they needed in order to organize the country's defense. The council supported the military and approved the draft presidential decree unchanged. The president signed the decree proposed by the military and sent it urgently to the Verkhovna Rada. As soon as we heard the discussion that perhaps the draft proposal by the military might violate the electoral rights of citizens, I immediately prepared a draft amendment limiting the duration of the martial law to 30 days. In order not to break the schedule of elections, I came to Verkhovna Rada. Everyone saw this, my protocol. It was in the text of my speech. Then there were dark things. Instead of listening to the president speak and vote 420, 430, you've seen all that happened yesterday in the Rada. Instead of worrying about the defense of the state, we have started a pre-election farce. Chaos. I imagine that if there would have been aggression and we came to the Rada and our tankers would sit and wait for opportunities for a military state, and at the same moment there are discussions of such a kind. Of course, I left the Rada. I made an appeal. I said that this is my principal position, the protection of the constitutional rights of citizens, including the electoral ones. And then they did not know what to do. Unfortunately, the discussions continued. I thought that I did not need to go to the Rada, but eventually, when the heat was already over the limit, I just had to go to the Rada to appeal to the deputies. And what happened? Everyone who was so blatantly accused that it is a horror, that we will never vote for this, that it is a pre-election PR, As soon as the question of responsibility was raised, there were at once 276 votes, and already the text of the law was adopted. Certainly, it's a shame, but now I want to urge that the threats that Ukraine now faces need unity. Unity of the Ukrainian people, unity with Ukrainian armed forces. For in order for our warrior to defend us, he must feel support, and not only in words, and not only in television. It is extremely important. Support for financial, budget, parliamentary, political, and, in the end, they should be protected by law, because the martial law provides protection to a Ukrainian warrior. And I don't know why nobody thought about it. It gives additional authority, but only in the case of war.
And can it happen that the military status will be cancelled before 30 days or maybe extended?
If you allow me, I just did not respond to this international reaction. And it was also very, very bright, because right after this sleeplessness night, when we sent the draft decree to the Verkhovna Rada, I started international consultations with our partners. The first one in the morning was Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary-General, with whom we had agreed on the immediate holding of the NATO-Ukraine Commission in Brussels, immediate determination of the position of NATO to the act of aggression to Ukraine. The Commission was immediately convened, held, the position was clearly formed. After that, I spoke with the President of Poland, Andrzej Duda. I appealed for Poland, which now, instead of Ukraine, represents our region at the UN Security Council. I asked that the issue of Russia's aggression against Ukraine be immediately put on the agenda of the Security Council. I would like to notice that 2 hours after Russia introduced a draft resolution on the situation regarding the violation of Ukraine by the borders of the Russian Federation, and the question of Russia has not even been put on the agenda. Our question was endorsed, and the discussion was held, and we were supported by an absolute majority of the members of the UN Security Council. It was a completely unique situation while discussing Ukraine in the OSCE, where Russia was actually in isolation. All the necessary issues were clearly defined. I had a conversation with the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, where I informed the Chancellor in detail about the current situation, asked her to discuss this issue, including in the Council of the European Union. I like to emphasize that I immediately in the night, I ordered a talk with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. We did not receive an answer. I had to appeal to the Chancellor of Germany so she could negotiate with Putin on the immediate release of Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian ships. We need to be united and take a stand for all our people. And I think it will be demonstrated. Well, there were many other talks, including the one with the Secretary of State of the US, Mr. Pompeo. You saw his statement after our conversation. The United States of America clearly supports Ukraine's position and demands the immediate de-escalation, the immediate release of the sailors, the immediate return of the ships, and in the end, definition of steps for the de-escalation, including in the Normandy format, within one single day. And this is a factor of respect for Ukraine. And we did not just talk, but receive absolutely powerful signals in support of Ukraine's position from all over the world. And in the Verkhovna Rada, at that time, the debates were still being led. Although I'd like to emphasize again, I thank the Verkhovna Rada for the fact that in the end the decision was accepted and common sense won.
What about the term?
Regarding the term of validity, the law, which approved the decree that I have introduced, said there are 30 days. It means the term of validity ends on December the 26th. When I was making an appeal, there was another date, but now the date was the 26th. So the regime of wartime from the 26th came into force. There were complete absurdities in the Verkhovna Rada yesterday when they all scared that the president, without the Verkhovna Rada, would extend the military status for an indefinite period of time. The law does not provide for such opportunities. It was a direct misinformation. It was a deliberately designed campaign of fake news or misinformation in order to prevent the adoption of this law. Who benefits? This is obvious. Why was it done? Where is the responsibility of these politicians? I think that this is a question that we need to think seriously about, and you'll be able to make sure who and for what they're doing all this.
Mr. President, how do you feel? Could we avoid the situation at sea? And what do we do with Azov now?
Of course, we can avoid everything. We can surrender Ukraine on one region, and they'll be happy, because we don't need the Sea of Azov. The Kerch Strait, Donbas, Donetsk or Luhansk. The Russian Empire suffered a huge blow when 4.5 years ago, after the Revolution of Dignity, after signing the association agreement by me, Ukraine determined its goal. And this goal is NATO and the European Union. Every day we make the necessary steps for progress in this direction, beginning with deep and widespread free trade area, then visa-free regime, then 4 spaces, and amendments to the constitution, which clearly states the commitment of the Ukrainian authorities. We should work on membership in the EU and NATO. It was once said that Russia, as an empire, cannot exist without Ukraine. And the main reason for such provocations is to undermine only. They started with the front line, then Russia realized it had to play its stability, then the 5th column inside Ukraine. It also does not work. And now the madness that Russia is doing now against Ukraine, it had to pay its economic growth, a decline in living standards, a devaluation of the national currency, an absolute extravagance to maintain military units on the territory of Donetsk and Luhansk regions and on the territory of Crimea. And all the same, they cannot give themselves a completely clear assessment that this is the way to nowhere. At the same time, during the war, having paid a high price, Ukraine is doing its best to defend its sovereignty, keep unity, and carry out reforms. By the way, it was discussed that the martial law can be an obstacle. And here I confirm that, unfortunately, the law clearly defines it. Elections cannot be held during martial law. Elections in the United Territorial Communities are also prohibited. I want to emphasize that I will make all possible efforts, as long as the existing threat of Russian aggression doesn't mean that democratic institutions in our country have been restricted. And doesn't mean that some military authority achieves power. I will make all efforts to prepare the necessary legislative initiatives till the next season of the Ukrainian Parliament, which will have a limited in-force period just till the end of the year, but which would allow to carry out elections in the United Territorial Communities. I think it will be also very important that the normal life of our Ukrainian citizens and the decentralized program, which I initiated in 2014, gained full support from people. I think that this is the rightful way.
Mr. President, thank you for your answers. I hope they brought mildness into citizens. Your will to share with people, to unite people of Ukraine, your help to Ukrainian army, this is really important.
Thank you.